changes happening with that, I guess. So I don't know if they have to bring back the House of Commons or anything to that effect to enable them to do this, but it looks like that's going to get scrapped as soon as possible. Maybe, or maybe we go into an election first. Who knows? Doug Ford turned on tariffs on electricity that is sent to the United States from Ontario. Royally pissed off Donald Trump. Donald Trump slapped him, and then Ford backed down within 4 hours. And that's very interesting. Did he not anticipate this? Did he not game this out? What happens when he does this? Ooh, right. Good point. I'll back down. No, that's not, don't do that. Did he not talk to anybody about this? Holy smokeronies. Anyway, we'll talk about all of that. Trump is going to get Greenland. I guess they're voting. I've got an update for you on that. I think he's going to get it. I think that's what's going to happen. I think it's like Thanos, or is it Thanos? Thanos. He's inevitable. It's unbelievable at this point in time. They're removing grade 10 exams in Manitoba. So that's interesting. Wab Canoe's territory. Then why? Degradation of education, I think. And that's pretty much what's going on. So unbelievable stuff happening there. Not surprising, just disappointing again, right? And absolutely no one wants Mark Carney. Mark Carney is ignoring that, though, and pretending that he's a rock star banker. Like, that exists. Does anybody care? No, absolutely not. Melanie in Saskatchewan says, so there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we have to start with some toilet memes for Mark Carney. So people are making memes about Mark Carney and his similarities to toilet seats. And I thought that's hilarious. That's hilarious. So here's the first one. What's the difference between Mark Carney and a toilet? A toilet has a seat, right? But I wish I had a rim shot. Oh man, I don't have a rim shot. And the second one is, if you think about it, Mark Carney and toilets have a lot in common. They're both installed, right? Another rim shot. Oh well. Missed opportunities. But that's not good when you're being parachuted into the position of prime minister and everybody's making fun of you using toilets. That's not, politicians don't like being tied to toilets. That's bad for your image, right? So Mark Carney doesn't care about his image, but now that he's a politician, he might, right? If you want to last in the position longer than Kim Campbell, you might want to care about that kind of stuff. Naya says there is no confidence for this. That breaks 150 years of constitutional convention, subverts Article 3 of the Charter, against rights of representative democracy. The Governor General cannot endorse this appointment. It is her duty to Canada, except that the Governor General is corrupt. So that sucks. So the Canadian press is announcing Carney transition team met with the Prime Minister, the PMO staff yesterday, and hope for Prime Minister swearing in by Friday. Fast. They're moving fast. And so that's supposed to be it, right? Oh, okay. Well, we got rid of Trudeau. Are you happy now? Can we continue robbing from you? And here's, as seen in Vancouver last night, Leah is laughing and sharing this, and Canada Proud is sharing this. It says F Mark Carney, right? And it's a big neon, just, homemade neon sign that says F Mark Carney on an overpass. So there you go, Mark Carney. You've taken over the reins of a crashing and burning party, and now more illegitimate than ever, right? Unbelievable stuff. Chris says it's getting worse. What is Mark Carney trying to hide? And the Globe and Mail says the campaign did not disclose. This is a quote from the Globe and Mail from March 11th. The campaign did not disclose, Mark Carney's campaign did not disclose the value of assets nor what was divested. No details were provided as to what potential conflicts of interest would be subject to the management plan. And the National Post says the statement did not detail the plan nor who would administer the blind trust. It also did not detail which assets may have divested. So what's going on? Why so much hiding of Mark Carney's finances? There's been no, I can't remember the word, but contribution of information about Mark Carney's finances to the people who need to deal with that when you first become an MP and you're first elected, and he's going to launch right into the prime minister spot. There are questions that are not being answered, and that's not an accident. They're just trying to hope people don't notice, I guess, and they can skate on by. It's crazy. Daisy Media says Chinooks circling the Hill, Carney and his motorcade at the Prime Minister's office. Parliament is still prorogued. Welcome to Ottawa. So it's like a bad... I remember when I was a kid, I was reading The Age of Apocalypse, and the whole thing is, in the future, things get terrible. Things are really, really terrible, and there's overseers, and it's very, very authoritarian and terrible and stuff like that. And we're very rapidly kind of normalizing with that predicted future. Less maybe less now than during the COVID era, but it's now there's no COVID and they're just saying things are real dangerous and we really, really need to have all of this stuff happening all at once. Don't question it. And if you question it, you're with the terrorists who will remain undefined and murky. And please don't cut their US aid funding, right? Like it's the terrorism is the call from terrorists is coming from inside the house, which didn't make sense in the 80s, but makes sense now because you can call somebody from inside the house now. But then you can really. Okay. Anyway, Larry Brock says, Mark Carney's first move as Liberal leader, hiring Trudeau's fired Minister of Misinformation, Marco Mendicino, as his chief of staff. Marco lied. Hold on. Marco is famously allergic to telling the truth. If he starts telling the truth, you can tell right away because he breaks out in hives, and the hives are internal too, so he starts having trouble speaking. So if he's speaking clearly, then you have to assume that he's not telling the truth because he's allergic to the truth, okay? In reality, Larry Brock continues, Marco Mendicino lied about transferring serial killer Paul Bernardo out of maximum security. Bernardo is still not in maximum security. I didn't know that. I thought that Bernardo was back in maximum security. Marco Mendicino lied about Beijing's police stations operating in Canada and denied that they existed. They did, and I think still do. Have we stopped that yet? I haven't seen the news reports about that. I heard that the RCMP can't do a damn thing about anything. So Mendicino lied about the Emergencies Act and said police asked for it. They did not. Marco lied so often, even Trudeau had to fire him. A liar hiring a liar, more proof that Carney is just like Justin. I mean, Carney lies more egregiously than Justin. And there's no reason to lie for a lot of the things that Carney lied about. He could have just stayed silent or explained it, and people probably would have been fine with it. But he went and lied about it for no reason at all, for no gain. It's so strange. The behavior is strange. Here is Anne, and she's reminding us further what Marco Mendicino did. Mendicino backdated court documents and lied about police requesting the Emergency Act. Lametti is supposedly coming in too. I don't know what position Lametti is being considered for. Mendicino is the chief of staff for Mark Carney, so that's interesting. But I don't know what they want for Lametti. But Anne says, Lametti hid behind his office at the POEC and testified, "Trust me," quickly followed by a resignation when the Emergency Act was deemed unlawful. Both of them pondered using the CAF, the Canadian military, Canadian Armed Forces, against citizens by putting a tank on the streets in Ottawa. So again, that post-apocalyptic authoritarian state from the X-Men rears its ugly head, right? Like, predictive programming? Right? The death of Superman. Daisy Media again says, here's Marco Mendicino fleeing from me earlier today. I did mention our politicians are completely inaccessible. They don't want to be held accountable, especially, and I showed you as well, one of the Rebel reporters, I can't remember, was it Alexander Lavoie, going out to speak to LeBlanc, and LeBlanc saying, no, we're done, like pulling his media and running away as soon as she was within like speaking distance. Unbelievable, because you would think our politicians would want to answer tough questions. And if these people are spreading misinformation, you'd think they'd relish the opportunity to set the information straight and give them a nice long audio clip to play about, the real information that they want them to talk about. But often, I mean, Dominic LeBlanc just spouts liberal talking points rather than actual, honest what's going on, right? So unfortunate. Mark Carney says, I met with with General Kerrigan today, Chief of Defense Staff, about the hard work ahead to make Canada secure. Together as Canadians, we're going to meet our 2% NATO spending target by 2030, modernize NORAD, strengthen our Arctic presence, and ensure we build a strong, resilient Canada. I don't believe him at all. And I think it's weird that he's got access. I mean, I know now that he's the Liberal leader and stuff, he is, de facto prime minister and all this, but it seems strange to have just a private citizen who wasn't living in Canada last year parachute into leadership in this way and have access to everybody, especially in the era of foreign interference and Manchurian candidates and like, who do you work for? Who do you really work for? Right? Like, it seems like nobody's got any questions. This guy's credentials are impeccable. And I mean, I often talk about how Trump going on reputation and all of the resumes and all the rest of it, appointed people that he knew were probably not working for the United States. And as he operated and asked them to operate on his behalf, they didn't, and he was proved right right? And so we've got a situation where somebody whose credentials should be impeccable, he should want to fix all the problems that he says he's going to fix, and he should have the capability to do that. But in reality, he's a globalist, I think, right? I think that he's probably not going to fix any of these problems because these problems are all by design. And when these problems result in their obvious conclusion people are warning about now, the powers that be, Mark Carney, will say, the only solution to this is central bank digital currency and digital ID. And people will say, the Messiah has spoken. This is how we solve our problem. This is the fix, definitely. And I mean, then we're just walking ourselves into a trap that will be much more difficult to get out of because they'll control pretty much everything. Then when they give you cricket bread, you're not going to be able to vote with your money because they'll just turn it off, right? No, you can't buy that whole flour. Don't you know how bad that is for the environment? Mark Carney's net zero, right? Here's Concerned Canadian. He says, I can't believe what he just said. We're doomed. It's 2 minutes. It's a 2-minute long clip. Let's see what he says for the first minute. Here we go.
I would say I see myself as part of the social movement. I think those at the vanguard of the social movement might see me as being farther behind. And I've, absolutely full credit, and I do in the book, to Greta Thunberg, who I've had the pleasure of meeting several times, and who absolutely has catalyzed that movement, the youth movement, and also done something incredibly valuable. And this is embarrassing to admit, but I think we should admit it. And this is often true, by the way, in finance. Very obvious truths are not fully understood in the system. So what she hammered home was the carbon budget, how small it was, how rapidly it was being depleted. And we've moved in a few short years, in part because of her, from a world of ESG, sustainability, broader conversations around, as I say, sustainability, to a relentless focus on net zero. It's called the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero for a reason, because we've moved to the relentless logic of having to get emissions down consistent with the carbon budget.
I wonder if Greta Thunberg gave Mark Carney a friendship bracelet. So ridiculous. He's a disaster. Here's Liz Truss. I looked this up. Grok says it's Liz Truss, but I think Grok is not as good as Elon claims it to be. Anyway, here is Liz. I think this is Liz Truss talking about how much of a disaster Mark Carney is.
And one of the main culprits in the failure to revive the British economy is the Bank of England and the terrible monetary policies they pursued, printing too much money, enabling too much government spending. Mark Carney in particular was fixated on net zero and one of the key proponents of Britain hosting COP26, one of the key proponents of us committing to even more unrealistic and disastrous net zero targets. And if you look at Britain's economy now, we haven't had any serious economic growth for quite some time. We've had too much immigration, so GDP per capita is actually lower than it was. And we've got the highest energy prices in the world thanks to those net zero policies. But not only did Mark Carney advocate those policies as governor of the Bank of England, at the last election, he backed Rachel Reeves, the now Labour Chancellor, who has made the situation even worse through tax rises, through more net zero policies, through more government regulation. And Britain is teetering on the brink now of a financial crisis. So it may have looked smooth at the time, what the Bank of England did, but it was a sugar rush to the British economy that actually damaged our long-term productivity. It damaged the capacity of the private sector, and we are now suffering the consequences. And the fact that he backed such an extremist Labour manifesto, I think, shows the types of policy that he would want to pursue if selected to be Prime Minister of Canada.
All right. Well, too late. He's been selected, and it's going to be a disaster. Buckle up, everyone, says Liz Truss. Joe Warmington says, what does this mean? Mark Carney says, today I met with Ambassador Hillman about U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods. While we can't control President Trump, we can control how we respond by supporting our workers and building a stronger, more resilient economy for our future. Some people were saying this means he's going to make a deal with the NDP. And I thought that's funny. Possible. Very, very plausible. Here is Crowder, and he's going after Mark Carney hard. Here is Crowder. It's 1:43. We'll listen to as much as makes sense.
Who is Mark Carney? A few things. He's not a politician. He's a banker. He has international interests, and he is very, very sympathetic to communist China. As a matter of fact, I would say this guy probably identifies as a communist, though he won't say it out loud. I'll make the case. References available. Some key facts here. Number one, he's a banker, right? He's not a politician. So he was the former head of the Bank of Canada from 2008 to 13. Bank of England, 13 to 2020. He oversaw Brexit. Now, currently, he's a UN Special Envoy on Climate Action and Finance.
Oh, okay.
Pretty sure you can guess what he does there. And no, he's not a member of Parliament. So his background is in international finance in the worst capacity possible. That's bad enough. It's scary when you understand that he's a manipulator, because he really is very much, I should say likely, allegedly, whatever qualifier I have to say here, a puppet for Beijing.
Good.
We'll get to the Chinese tariffs on Canada right now, which would be the most relevant point, you would think, during the speech. He mentioned President Trump during that speech 11 times, just in that one speech. China, 0.
Ooh.
Everything maybe a half point. No, 0, not at all. Even though he did get a special congratulations from China's foreign minister, he has incredibly close ties to the CCP. So let me give you some examples here, references in the description, as always. 2017, he met with Xi Jinping in private at Davos. Big fans of Davos here, as China was trying to fight President Trump in a trade war. Okay, 2018, he helped lead 1.4 billion pounds of investment from the UK to support China's Belt and Road Initiative. We've covered that. 2024, he was speaking at a China Development Forum, and he said, it is a good thing that the RMB becomes a global reserve currency.
Oh, really?
So there you go. Crowder doing the investigative work. Very interesting stuff. Who is Mark Carney? Your next prime minister, maybe this Friday, as early as this Friday. So don't let him sway you with the removal of the carbon tax. Anyone with sense wanting Canada to do well would remove the tax on our inputs, because any tax on our inputs hampers our productivity. And everybody's talking about how Canada's productivity has been tanking the last couple of years. The whole reason is because of the carbon tax. It's by design. That's the whole point. Anyway, let's talk about the election. It is imminent, I guess. And people are laughing at Frank Graves. And this is the Ecos poll. And apparently the poll has been deleted. But Frank says this is one of the recent polls. And it's got the Liberals up to 48 points. Conservatives down to 31.5%. And NDP down to 8.8%. So the Liberals are just taking off in a vertical. This is somebody said it looks like, oh yeah, Frankie fell asleep with his pen in his hand, right? Like, yeah, is this real, do you think? No, but they're going to use it as justification to hand, a majority over to Mark Carney? Yowza. So unbelievable stuff. I think our elections are rigged. I think, I've got a story later in this series of tabs to show you. Well, you know what? Let's talk about it right now, because I think it's important. But our elections are rigged. Here's one example. Juno News says, Elections Ontario orders the removal of alleged voter fraud video expose. Elections Ontario has ordered a whistleblower to take down a video in which he demonstrates the alleged election vulnerabilities in the province's election system. So this is in the province of Ontario. And it says, Elections Ontario has ordered a whistleblower to take down the video. Spencer, who operates the YouTube channel MCGA, filmed himself registering to vote using only an edited document with a TD Bank logo, a fake name, and a phony address. He claimed to have visited 13 returning offices with the fake identification. So, I mean, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? Like, if everybody's fake voting, I might as well fake vote too and record it for posterity. My prediction about what's going to happen here: he's going to be arrested for election fraud, and Ontario Elections is not going to change, or Elections Ontario is not going to change one damn thing about their process. Everything is going to remain the same, except this guy is going to get slapped with some kind of criminal something or other for doing what he did on the video. I hope I'm wrong about this prediction, okay? I will tell you if it happens, but I hope I'm wrong about it. But our system seems so cracked that they would say, the real problem here is you doing this and telling people about it. Not the actual doing it part. Doing it is fine. telling people about it is an unforgivable crime. You've crossed a line, sir. Right? Like, unbelievable. I don't think so, but here we are in Canada. Max Bernier says, if our elections weren't rigged, you could come and vote for the PPC. And he's got a Leonardo DiCaprio meme here. It says, to those of you who see that mass immigration and globalism will destroy Canada, the People's Party of Canada welcomes you. And he says, come on in. So there you go. Electioneering, everyone. This is the weirdest, not weirdest, but Poilievre, people know who Pierre Poilievre is. He was winning the polls. He had something like 250 odd seats predicted or something like that. Something ridiculous. People know who Poilievre is. So when if he's projected as down in the polls, which is kind of nonsense because the polls are rigged, but if he's projected as down in the polls and he thinks to himself, the problem here is the voters don't know me well enough. Here's my resume in long form. Now, this is in response to a question, but this is boring. I'm bored to tears by this. He is not talking about things people care about. You want to hear my political prowess, ladies? Like, nobody wants to hear about it. Like, don't bring it out at parties. Nobody wants to hear about it. It's people, not that people don't like talking politics, because they like talking politics when everybody agrees, right? Because everybody's like, oh yeah, that's so right. But then when people disagree, and I like a good debate, right? But I'm very few and far between. Other people don't like debates, and then other people who are not involved in the debate get real uncomfortable, apparently. I guess. But listing your political resume resonates way less than you think. Okay, here's Pierre Poilievre in response to a question, long form listing his political resume. And I just don't understand. I could listen to a politician speak about important policies and what they think they're going to do about them in the future for a long time. I think it's interesting because I think plans are interesting and practical. Like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and the practical way to get there is here's some details, right? I love that stuff. Listening to politicians rehash their old victories, much less. Here we go.
Mr. Poilievre, what economic and diplomatic experience do you have to go up against Donald Trump?
Oh, quite a lot, actually. So I was the Minister of Jobs and Housing in the Harper government, during which time housing cost half as much as it does today. I helped Mr. Harper cut the GST, cut income tax, cut business tax, and balance the budget. Over my time in
I didn't
Parliament,
realize he was still talking. Oh my gosh, I just fell asleep. Like, what are you talking about, man? I helped Mr. Harper. Are you kidding me? Have you heard of Doug Ford threatening to turn off the electricity to the United States? Did you hear about that? Do you want to talk about that? Like, what? Stand up to Donald Trump? Are you? Okay, the framing of the question is insane. The fact that the media is egging on the official opposition to push exactly the same solution as the liberals is insane. This whole thing's insane. The fact that he's going along with it, insane. Everything is insane. I don't trust any of them. They're all working for the globalists. Jack says, yikes. I'll show you this tweet by Poilievre, but it's essentially the same thing that he was saying. Like, all of the things that the liberals say, it's in the tariff section. But basically, he's proposing all the same things that the liberals want. And Catturd says, we should stop all trade with you. Maybe then you'll stop bashing Trump 24/7. So, like, get your head out of your ass. There are issues in Canada that need to be dealt with. Catturd is getting sick of everyone in Canada bashing Trump, even people who should have sense, right? And the Conservative Party, by all rights, should have sense. And they don't. Dennis says, most of my life it was possible to have the illusion of a sovereign Canada. Now I realize that the country is entirely occupied, exploited, and manipulated in every aspect by the Western globalist elites, with no realistic chance of any popular political uprising because of a large bought-out professional class, except now maybe via MAGA? Never thought I would say that. Maybe it was the Calgary trip while reading Emmanuel Todd. So I don't know. It's interesting how many people are saying, wow, I think we're actually stuck. I think that we are stuck in a situation where Western globalist elites have us over a barrel, and there didn't appear to be a way out. And now there maybe is a way out, but it's going to be bumpy. It's going to be bumpy, I think. It's not going to be an easy way out. Keir Starmer is talking about doing all the same things as Pierre Poilievre and our other globalists as well. So if you thought that this is just a Canada problem, I try to illustrate that this is happening all across the West. It's not just Canada, but they're using the same strategy or similar strategies that work other places, they'll implement in places that don't have them running yet. But here's Keir Starmer, and he says, We're going further and faster to build the homes and infrastructure Britain desperately needs, creating jobs across the country, making the dream of home ownership a reality, and delivering economic growth in every region. That's my plan for change in action. And I said, bring it home, but I guess nobody likes that because they don't understand the joke. Shucks. Anyway, gotta play to your audience, right? James says, just not building them for British citizens. Oh, sounds familiar, right? UK Labour control like Barnsley Council currently have a policy of denying any single person under 40 access to social housing, even if they've lived in Barnsley all their lives. I know of one who's been on the list for years and so on. So they're doing exactly what's going on in Canada, claiming they're going to build homes and then importing a wholesale replacement population on the back of taxpayers building those homes, thinking that, oh, yes, we're going to reduce the cost of homes here. No. We're just building homes for the people they're importing. So that's not great. Let's talk about the tariffs, because the tariffs are a big deal. And Scott Moe, Premier of Saskatchewan, says Saskatchewan produces 55% of Canada's canola, Alberta produces 29%, and Manitoba produces 16%. Thousands of jobs depend on canola production and processing in Western Canada. Whether or not you agree with the federal government's response to the U.S. trade action, there's no doubt that they have taken action and reacted quickly as they should. But when it's an exclusively Western Canada industry like canola under attack from Chinese tariffs, crickets. What's the plan, Mark Carney? So there is no plan, because they're not going to do anything, because while the U.S. is pressuring tariffs on Chinese EVs, and so it's not like the federal government can do anything about that, but they could announce some kind of what we're going to do with all that canola oil, right? Or the canola that you're growing. So, and how to replace that crop or whatever, and nothing so far. And well, time's a wasting, right? Like, we're in March, and sure, there's snow on the ground still here in Ontario, but I'm sure things are going to be changing soon, and we need to have a plan, and it doesn't seem like there's any urgency, and that's a problem. That's very concerning. The Black Horse says, look, it's a tech-led market correction being blamed on tariffs. This is what it looks like to see the U.S. corporate oligarchy begin a likely long campaign to discipline the Trump tariff agenda. I think the stock market is being used, or is used, as a weapon for compliance. I think that they use it to, even U.S. presidents, but also corporations, right? Like, oh, this is a nice stock you've got here. Be a darn shame if somebody shorted it, right? And so, like, if powerful people start shorting your stock, maybe you take notice, and maybe your entire business gets destroyed because your stock gets destroyed because these people target you in whatever they're doing right now to the whole stock market to deal with Trump. And I don't think this is out of the realm of possibility, like having the stock market as a useful weapon of the elites. Holy smoke, because you can use it to inflate anybody you want too, right? Like, you can say, oh, just buy a couple of the right stocks, and man, you're going to be rich. And bingo, bango, bongo, right? You've got somebody under your thumb, and somebody who you can control too, somebody that you could take it all away at the stroke of a pen too. The Kobayashi letter says, breaking, the S&P 500 has officially entered correction territory, now down 10% from an all-time high. So they don't want Trump touting all that economic success. They'll tank his stock market. Interesting. Unusual Whales says, market action signals that the White House should change course on tariffs. Jim Cramer has said. What do the elites want? Stop the tariffs, because the tariffs take away the interconnectedness of the world and take away the third-party control of the United States, right? And so that's what they want. They want the tariffs to force that interconnectedness. And speaking of interconnectedness, Canada supplying the United States with some electricity is a bad idea, says Donald Trump. And so, like, when you draw attention to this power that you've got, Doug Ford, you've now screwed yourself out of money. And, like, by extension, Ontario. So our taxes are not going to go as far now, because there's all of this money that was coming in for electricity that is no longer going to be coming in, because Donald Trump is going to solve this problem. And so here is Donald Trump and Doug Ford dealing in a very public way about this whole electricity tariff that Doug Ford implemented to get Donald Trump's attention. He got his attention all right, and Donald Trump says, we're going to fix this problem. It's insane to have this, to do this, to allow a foreign country to generate our electricity. Who made these deals? Anyway, Kirk says, breaking, Donald Trump responds to Doug Ford's 25% tariff on electricity by adding another 25% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum tomorrow. He also states that if the tariffs are not removed, he will substantially increase tariffs on Canada on April 2nd. Instead of starting to build out Canada, remove red tape, and get working, our politicians decided to enter a trade war with an economy 14 times bigger than us and remove liquor off the shelves. And all parties supported this. Yep. They sure do. Here's Trump. He says, based on Ontario, Canada, placing a 25% tariff on electricity coming into the United States, I have instructed my Secretary of Commerce to add an additional 25% tariff to 50% on all steel and aluminum coming into the United States from Canada, one of the highest tariffing nations anywhere in the world. This will go into effect tomorrow morning, March 12th. Also, Canada must immediately drop their anti-American farmer tariff of 250% to 390% on various U.S. dairy products, which has long been considered outrageous. I will shortly be declaring a national emergency on electricity within the threatened area. This will allow the U.S. to quickly do what it has to be done to alleviate this abusive threat from Canada. If other egregious long-time tariffs are not likewise dropped by Canada, I will substantially increase on April 2nd the tariff on cars coming into the United States, which will essentially permanently shut down the automobile manufacturing business in Canada. Those cars can easily be made in the United States. Also, Canada pays very little for national security, relying on the United States for military protection. We are subsidizing Canada to the tune of more than $200 billion a year. Why? This cannot continue. The only thing that makes sense is for Canada to become our cherished 51st state. That would make all tariffs and everything else totally disappear. Canadians' taxes would be very substantially reduced. They will be more secure militarily and otherwise than ever before. There will no longer be a northern border problem, and the greatest and most powerful nation in the world will be bigger, better, and stronger than ever, and Canada will be a big part of that. The artificial line of separation drawn many years ago will finally disappear, and we will have the safest and most beautiful nation anywhere in the world, and your brilliant anthem, O Canada, will continue to play, but now representing the great and powerful state within the greatest nation that the world has ever seen. So there you go. Oh, Canada. You can keep your anthem and stuff, and your French, whatever. So in response, of course, Pierre Poilievre says, you know what the Liberals would do? I'll do that too. He says common sense conservatives strongly condemn President Trump's latest unjust tariffs targeting Canadian steel and aluminum workers and manufacturers. These tariffs cannot in any way be justified and are yet another betrayal by the president of the long friendship between Canada and the United States. I'm calling on the government to immediately bring in retaliatory tariffs to respond to this unjust act and protect Canadian steel and aluminum workers. If President Trump is applying 50% tariffs on our steel and aluminum, then Canada must hit back with 50% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imported from the United States. This is not a good plan. This is not a good plan at all. Back to this. Our message to the U.S. administration must be clear. Do not mistake our kindness for weakness. We are a strong, proud, and sovereign country, and we will fight back against these attacks against our economy and our workers. And if the president applies further tariffs, as he has threatened, we will hit back on those as well. We will not falter in defense of our country, and these attacks will only harden our resolve. I'm also calling on the Liberal government to further defend our steel and aluminum workers, listen to the leaders in our industry, and take additional action to combat illegal dumping and unfair trade practices by China. Finally, I'm calling on Mark Carney to reverse his plan to impose a massive new industrial carbon tax on Canadian steel and all other heavy industry. Carney's carbon tax and Trump's tariffs would decimate our industry forever. Only Canada First conservatives will axe the tax, greenlight pipelines made with Canadian steel, and bring home production and paychecks. Carney and Trudeau's Liberals have imposed taxes and blocked projects, making us more reliant on the Americans, while Carney profited by shipping jobs out of Canada to the U.S. He sold out Canada already, and will do it again. We need a conservative government that will put Canada first. So the whole beginning part sounds very, very liberal, and then it kind of picks up by building pipelines and things like that. But again, Carney's promising to greenlight pipelines now too. So your mileage may vary, right? Here is Pat Bondi saying Canada, there will be grave consequences imposed on Canada if they think about shutting down the energy. So here's just a back and forth about this. Here we go.
Conversations between the administration and the Canadians going on over this tariff, because the Ontario Premier says the next step is to cut off electricity. to the U.S.
And the president put out a statement after seeing those comments and said that it would be there would be grave consequences imposed on Canada if they think about shutting off electricity for the United States of America and our citizens. And the president is also determined to ensure that we are depending on American electricity, not the electricity production of foreign nations, including our allies in Canada. As for conversation.
So that whole agreement that we had there to sell electricity to the United States, and it was all friendly and nice, and it was going to remain friendly and nice until Doug Ford weaponized it, and now it's going to get crushed by Trump. So, I mean, I'm shocked. I'm absolutely shocked by this. Yesterday, David says, I don't want to speak out of turn and Team Canada and all that, which is horseshit. But are we sure Doug Ford knows what he's doing? No. Yesterday, I was saying, I don't think this is the right move. And I said, maybe it's me. Maybe I don't have the stones for this. But yesterday, I was even saying to my wife, I said, like, I don't even assess this as Trump's fault. And I've got a tab here that talks about how, this one. BUAC says, why does everybody keep saying this is unprovoked? Right? Brian Lilly says the same thing. It's an unprovoked trade war, right? Why does everybody say that? Didn't Trump ask to stop letting the flow of illegal drugs, fentanyl specifically, to stop crossing the U.S. border? Did we not also find out from Sam Cooper that the drug industry in Canada is worth $31 to $91 billion, which is bigger than the GDP of the oil industry? So the political class choose to ignore something that's blatantly obvious and blame Trump because it's easier to blame Trump than it is to fix the out-of-control drug cartel that they let inflate Canada by pushing for unvetted immigration for the past decade. The politicians completely ruined this country. The tariffs were not only warned for months ahead of time, they were also given a solution that the U.S. would never put tariffs on Canada. But here we are pushing more tariffs, which only enriches government and takes all the wealth from the people. And he says 51st state is the only way. And there's a lot of people, again, this is the second one, and I'm not necessarily trying to cherry pick. I'm just trying to reflect what I'm seeing. And what I'm seeing is people saying, yeah, this 51st state thing seems to solve a lot of problems that don't have an obvious solution if we just remain status quo. Status quo doesn't seem to be an option. Here is Mark Nixon, and Doug Ford is talking here. Well, we'll just play a little bit of this. This is before he backs down.
Now is Doug Ford, the premier of Canada's most populous territory, Ontario. And Premier Ford, as we mentioned, President Trump is now saying he is enacting a 50% tariff on steel and aluminum from Canada, which will go into effect tomorrow in response to your actions. What's your reaction?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I start every interview with saying we love Americans. I love Americans, spent 20 years of my life there. And I know Canadians love Americans and vice versa. In saying that, we will not back down. We will be relentless. I apologize to the American people that President Trump decided to have an unprovoked attack on our country, on families, on jobs, and it's unacceptable. Let's work together. Let's get to the table if he has issues.
So there we go. It's 6 minutes, so link is in the description. Brett says, thanks to Doug Ford's decision to use electricity as a bargaining chip and threat, Trump says Canada will pay a financial price so big that it will be read about in history books for many years to come. Ford is trying to outdo Trudeau for dumbest politician ever to get elected in Canada, maybe even the world. So here's Donald Trump again. He says, why would our country allow another country to supply us with electricity, even for a small area? Who made these decisions and why? And can you imagine Canada stooping so low as to use electricity that so affects the life of innocent people as a bargaining chip and threat? They will pay a financial price for this so big that it will be read about in history books for many years to come. So pretty wild and crazy stuff with our biggest trading partner. I've got to end the live stream right now. This is the end of the free show. So head on over to CanadaPoly.com if you would like to get to the rest of the main show. And we'll see you next time. Sorry, stopping the stream. And we'll carry on. And sorry, I know it's bumpy. I apologize. I'm trying to figure out this live stream thing. Canadian Independent is talking about this whole thing as well. I almost forgot to turn off the live stream. That's why it was bumpy. I had a plan, and then the plan went out the window. Anyway, I digress. Trump says Canada will pay a financial price so high for this. U.S. President Donald Trump issued another statement following Premier Doug Ford's announcement yesterday of a 25% surcharge on electricity exported to the United States. And that's not great. Like, that's not a great outcome, right? And I don't know how we're going to fix this whole thing, except that Doug Ford blinks, right? Maxime Bernier says the drama queen at Queen's Park has calmed down a bit, it seems. Trump doubles tariff on Canadian metals causing Ontario to back down on electricity price hikes. So there you go. He said, this was too far. But I don't know if the damage done has been done, right? I don't know if we're in a situation now where the 50% on steel goes in and we're kind of screwed holding the bag with nothing, right? And I mean, not that counter tariffs are a good idea. They're not. But we've allowed Doug Ford to make a catastrophic error, right? And that's not great. Melissa says, Doug Ford got the message and stepped back on his electricity surcharge. Good job. So Inside Paper says Ontario agreed to suspend its 25% surcharge on exports of electricity to Michigan, New York, and Minnesota, Premier Ford says. So, yep, there you go. He's walked it back. And hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful